and lots of bits of paper. It was a piece of wallpaper rolled out with lots of bits of paper attached to it as I added the branches. I eventually moved on to Family Tree Maker and had one of the very early versions of that, which I updated regularly. And I remember persuading my dad to go with me one day to do some research, and he took me to the place where he was born, told me lots of stories, and we bumped into several people in the area where he told them what we were doing, and they added bits to the story and things that he had forgotten. So it was actually a really interesting trip that day. My mum's also been a great help with me going, we go to a lot of visit graveyards because there's such a lot of information that you can pick up from the gravestones. So when I'm back in the UK, because I actually live in Tenerife, in frequent visits to the UK, we travel around and we go and try and cover as many graveyards as possible, starting really around the East Lothian area, which is where my Aitchison branch came from, and the Borders, which is where the origins come from. And there's some lovely little villages around those areas. In 2017, I decided to embark on a one-name study, basically to try and help me break down a brick wall. I took the course with with Julie Goucher, as it happens, and it was really most interesting. And anybody who's thinking about a one-name study, or anybody who's already embarked on one, I would really encourage you to try and do the course, because there's so much that you learn from it. It gives you lots of guidance on best practices. It gives you opportunities to try out different software and programs, which otherwise you might just never have heard of. So it really is worthwhile doing. At this stage in my study, I'm now approaching 40,000 individuals on the study, just under 39,240 to be exact. And I've got over 8,000 media items attached to those different people. I do add individuals to my study. I don't wait until I have them in a family. If I found someone on a census on their own, I will put them into the study. And as I work through, I try and find a way of working them into the other families. And there could be duplicate persons on my database, because as yet, I don't have enough evidence to confirm if they are the same person or not. There's lots of people with the same names, but until I can actually find if someone on the 81 census and the 71 census, I would enter them as two separate individuals until I can prove that they are the same person. And then I would merge the files together and merge the duplicates. I've also set up, or rather taken over, a DNA project for the Aitchison surname, and there's currently 77 people involved. Unfortunately, not all of them with the Aitchison spelling as in my name. There are many variants, and Acheson particularly comes from the Irish side, Aitchinson, Aitchison, and numerous others. But in my study so far, I've focused on primarily my own spelling, but anytime I come across a different spelling, I will make a note of it and enter into the database. I'm not ignoring the others. It's just a matter of timing and priorities and working my way through different data sets. I'm short of male Aitchisons on my own side of the family to try and follow the Y DNA lineage. So that's obviously a challenge if you don't have male relatives. But Susan Meets was invaluable at the start of me taking over this project and getting me going. Again, if anyone's considering, Susan is such a great help in getting you started on that side of things. As I mentioned, I did the introduction to one-name studies in 2017. I then went on and did the advanced one-name studies in the April of the following year. And then they had a new course that was introduced. And again, it was Julie who actually dealt with this one. It was the practicalities of a one-name study. Because what I felt from the first two, I was still missing, for me on the one-name study, how to actually do something. And that's why I thought the practicalities would be really useful. I like personally working in an organized way. And it's that how to do it that I felt I was still missing. All of the courses, I must say, were extremely useful and definitely well worthwhile doing. And I think the biggest thing I had to get my head around was that there's no one way of doing it, which once I accepted that, I made much faster progress. I was kind of looking for an instruction manual of how to do it, and it didn't really exist. But everyone approaches their one-name study differently, and I think that's one of the things that you have to get your head around. There isn't one way of doing it. As a side, I'm also doing a distance learning course with the Institute of Heraldic and Genealogical Studies, and I'm about halfway through that, working towards the higher certificate. And again, that is also, I have found very, very useful, having a one name study in doing that course, because I found particular people that I could focus on to help me with each of the assignments, working through that. I registered my study after doing the Ferris course, and being a member of the Guild has been really helpful. The blog challenge a couple of years ago made me look at setting up a website. I do need to revisit that, because at the time I hadn't really realised there were two options in the site that I dealt with. One has a charge and the other one is a free option, and unfortunately I, through inexperience, picked the wrong option. So it is something to have a look out for before you go ahead with it. I need to look into that, and if I can try and switch them over, and then I need to do a lot more work on that one. There's just so much to learn. There's so many different areas that you can get involved with. I did do the blog challenge, which was posting 10 blogs over the period of time allocated. And it was interesting putting each article together and reading all the others that took part. There were so many different takes on the same subject. And the subjects were so diverse. Having a deadline, I must say, helped to actually accomplish the blog. And I'm afraid, again, time constraints meant I haven't kept it up, but I will do at some stage in the future. And the website address, I think, will probably be on the handout off my blog page. The blog page attached to it is, is a WordPress site that I used, and this is one of the blogs that I did for that challenge, which was preparing for a graveyard visit, which I'll cover a little bit more later today. One of the big questions after doing the course was publishing the study, and when was the right time to do it. And I think that's a question a lot of people get stuck on, is when is it right to actually publish. Obviously my study was in its early stages. There was still a huge amount of work in collecting data to do. My project wasn't complete, but I decided to take the plunge. Not long after I did the first course, in fact. Just get on and do it. You will never be finished. And I think Julie mentioned that before, finishing a one-name study. Unless it's a very, very, very small study, you will never be finished. There's always something to add to it. The website can always be updated once it's out there. And in fact, I update mine about once a month. By being out there, your site will get noticed. You will get contacts that otherwise you wouldn't know that you're doing the study. And I've had contacts from Australia, New Zealand, Austria, the States, Canada, and many from the UK as well. Another thing you can do with your website address is contact Cindy Ingle from Cindy's List. The Aitchison one name study is listed there. In fact, if enough one name study sites did it, we might even get our own category, like the one place study category. I was contacted as well by the British Library in July of 2019, who wanted to archive my website in the UK Web Archive and make it publicly available. The UK Web Archive was established in 2004 to capture and archive websites from the UK domain and across the web. Responding to the challenge of a digital black hole in the nation's memory, it contains specially selected websites that represent different aspects of UK heritage on the web, as well as important global events. They work closely with leading international institutions to collect and permanently preserve the web. Again, a great way to preserve the work that you have done. This was one of my factors in deciding to go ahead with it. I have no children. My niece and nephew are not really interested in it, and it would be a shame for all the hours of work I've put in to be lost when I pass on, apart from having it registered with the Guild as well. There is an online license form to complete, but the service is free. So it's another place where your study could be registered and not be lost, all the work that you've done. The challenges with going ahead with doing a site. There is no manual with TNG. There's no step-by-step instruction. And again, because I'm someone that likes to work with instructions and work my way through things, I've had some issues. And I'm sure I must give the TNG team a pain in the head with all my questions. But a big thanks here to Jim and the team for all their help. One of the issues to understand earlier on is you have to have one master file, and that's John Lyle. Thank you for your guidance on that one. I had updated something on my software and also on the TNG site. When I came to do an update, it obviously wiped out what I'd put onto the TNG site. So one master file, whichever it is, whether it's TNG site or whether it's your software, you can only use one. The upside is that it's fairly easy to use. It's intuitive with easy menus. It's not totally compatible with the Family Tree Maker descriptions, but that is something that's been registered and German and the team are currently working on. So when you export your file, the GEDCOM file, I'm sure that at some stage there will be a solution for that one. I'm really reluctant to move from my Family Tree Maker. I've got used to it. I've used it for years. People don't like change, and I'm afraid, although I did try the different programs, I didn't get on with Roots Magic at all. I think if I did have to switch to a different program, it would be Family Historian. The logic of that program kind of fitted with me better. But the course let me try the options. It was one of the advantages of that, and you can try and see what you like. Updating your profile page on the Guild website is another way of letting people know what you're doing, and you can put your link on to here, both your own website and your DNA project. Again, well worth doing, and I've had some contacts who have come through the Guild website. So here it is. I took the leap, set up my site, TNG site. Feel free to come and have a look around. This is a picture that I found in my grand's photo box long after she'd passed. Turns out it was my grandfather with his parents and siblings. The little boy with the dog is my grandfather, who was a shepherd. And the TNG site, there are various templates that you can use for your page. So you can choose the template and the look of the front page. My research had been over many years. I had no standard way of naming files. I had duplicates, I had files with different families, I had files from old laptops, piles of papers, scans. So after some of my early issues with TNG, I decided to have a complete reorganization of my files. A huge task, but well worth doing. I was encouraged that everyone does it their way. One of the methods often described was filing within families. Well, that simply didn't work for me. I had too many Jameses, Williams and Georges, or Mary, Isabella and Agnes. And my project is actually quite a large one, and files get lost in files. I found I couldn't find things that I was looking for, so I really didn't like that system or that method. I then decided I would do files for Australia, Scotland, England, and set within that births, deaths, marriages, etc. Stop. I had to work through and think what would be simple and what would work for me in my logic. So I came up with the following system. I name all my files. So if it's a birth certificate or related to births, birth certificate, the country, a 3-letter code for the country, the year, underscore, and the name of the person. If there are 2 that have the same name, then I would put the month as well. But generally I found up to now, even though it's a large study, there's not too often a time where I have to add the month. This way, your computer will sort in your files automatically into country order and then the chronological order. So I have all my births and any documents related to birth in one file. I've done the same with deaths, death notices, death indexes, and instead of death cert, I would call it death notice, the same country, 3-digit code, and then the year. Census, the same way, Census Canada, as you can see on this one, 1901, Peter Aitchison. Then I've got Sen England, Sen Scotland, marriage certificates and banns. It suits me because it's the way my brain or the logic of my brain works. So as I say, I'm encouraged that everybody does it their own way, and this one works for me. And I find it sorts things, it's easy to find them, and I don't end up with duplicate file names, census 1901 Peter Aitchison, and then I find there's 6 of them and I don't know which one is his one. This way I can sort it out easily. I spent a lot of time trying to work it out, and then the whole reorganization over 30 years of collecting data, putting it all together. Now I just remember the format that I use, and as I get a new document, I put it into that file format straight away. So here's what I mean. There's a couple of screenshots just to show the sorting of the file. So you can see on the left, all the census are sorted. You've got the Australian ones first, then it goes to Canada, alphabetically comes next, England, and the same with your marriage certificates. You've got the mixture on there. So how do I work through? Well, I prioritize a data set. I work through that record set first. It's very easy to get sidetracked, and I do occasionally let myself get distracted so I can enjoy some of the research to keep it fun. But it's important to keep track of what you've done and the date that you did it. Information is often added to online records, and most of the records it sets I work through online, and new records are being added all the time. Go back and review record sets to see if there have been any additions. So if you've kept track of what you did and when you did it, it's easy for you to see if there have been any updates. And here's what I mean by that. I use an Excel spreadsheet, so I keep track. This is I'm working through the Find My Past records on this one. They have county. I keep track of the county, the data is transcribed. Excuse me. So civil births, there were none in Dumfries. Civil deaths and burials, there were 18. I transcribed them on the 15th of April 2021. If I go back and check that record set and I find that there's now 25, I know I need to go and find a few more records and put them into the database. That way it's easy to see. And by working through a record set and a particular county, you get used to the families as well. You can see and start reading the names a lot easier if some of the writing is a little bit difficult to read. Census records, the same format, obviously working through, but definitely working through counties at a time does help you get to know the families, and you can spot where someone has gone missing or when they appear in different places. I mentioned earlier my graveyard research, so I just want to share my preparation, which might help those that are looking at that. As I say, there's so much information in a graveyard. But over a long weekend, because I live in another country, I have to plan it really well to be able to make the most of the time that I have here when I come back to Scotland and to cover as much ground as possible in the restricted time available. The Aitchison surname is supposedly from the Borders area of Scotland, which is where I focus my trips so far. Starting in East Lothian, Haddingtonshire, where my grandfather George Aitchison was born on the 21st of May 1900, and working down towards the border with England, encompassing Berwickshire, and currently planning my next trip to Roxburghshire. On my last trip, I did get into Roxburghshire, but there's still so many graveyards to visit there. I start off with the Ordnance Service survey maps from the OS Explorer range, which is a really good size, and it marks all the graveyards on there. The church or cemetery is often marked as CEMY, semi, that's shown on them. And these maps all have a mobile download option as well, which is really great these days, that you can take it with you without having to have the big maps. But it would be very easy to miss a cemetery or a graveyard if you didn't do this. For example, in Hawick, which I'm planning on my next trip, you can actually see that there's 2 cemeteries marked on the map here in pink. And normally we go and think, oh, well, I've visited the cemetery, that's it. So it would be very easy to miss one if you didn't know that you were actually looking for 2 different cemeteries. I would then go to the Scottish Association of Family History, to their website, and go to their burial grounds database. And the database can be searched by county. So putting in Roxburgh, I come up with 74 potential burial grounds for the area, and many of them would have an Aitchison burial. So you can copy that list and paste it into an Excel workbook. Again, I use Excel a lot in my research, and you make notes against each site. And if you click onto the burial site, it takes you to the next page, and that page gives you information about the burial site, and in many cases a map. Occasionally the pin on the map is slightly off its target, but it gives you a really good idea. And if you tie that in with your Ordnance Survey map, you'll be able to highlight all the burial sites in the area. It also tells you if there's any memorial inscriptions already published and where they're held. And these are invaluable in finding some of the older gravestones whose inscriptions may have eroded over time. The Borders Family History Society has many of these. Some of the burial sites, however, may no longer exist, and there are many KISS which are registered on the site, and there's nothing to find now. I've been to quite a few of those, but it's always just nice to pop by and check what might be there. And then obviously, once I've looked up the sites on the list, I cross-check it on the map and mark any that may not have shown up. So I have a full knowledge of all the burial sites in the area that I'm going to visit. There are some old burial sites that don't show up on the Ordnance Survey maps. So then I would turn to Canmore Maps, and that resource helps me to find the exact spot that I'm looking for. So here is the site, for example, of the Buccleuch Church ruins. If a burial site exists but it's hidden away, and then that's how I would find it. And it's also really useful to zoom into the larger graveyards and print out a map of the graveyard, and then you can use it to log exactly where you find your gravestones, as the images show of St Mary's Church in Hawick and Wilton Cemetery. On one of my last trips, I was looking for a burial site, the old site of the Langton Church, which was hidden away in the woods. I stopped a couple walking their dog who lived in the area and had been walking there for over 20 years. They had never heard of the graveyard. I found it about 50 metres from where I had spoken to them, but would never have known where it was if I hadn't used the Canmore maps beforehand. Once I've visited the site, I then mark it on my Aitchison One Name Study website under the cemeteries section with a pin in the exact location and upload any Aitchison headstones that I've found. So a lot of preparation beforehand, but definitely worth the effort, as I can't just pop back if I've missed something. I hope sharing my methodology helps anyone thinking about grave hunting. And grave hunting is so useful to help build up the picture of people. This one in Kensal Green in London of General Sir John Aitchison, as you will see, gave me a whole lot of information. Firstly, I started with the map of the graveyard. To the left of the large circle in the centre there, to the left of the large circle in the centre of the picture was where I was headed after having obtained the burial register. And this is a copy of the burial register, which has a whole lot of information. The plot number, the people interred in the plot with their dates. It has funeral details, in this case, a small piece of paper attached, which even gave details of wills. This is one of the magnificent 7 graveyards of London, which opened in 1833. This is a huge site, so you need to know where you're looking for, otherwise you'll wander around aimlessly and never find what you're there for. There are many famous people in here, and next to the one I was looking for was the mausoleum of His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge. In fact, I nearly missed the one I was looking for, as the name on the front had faded so much, but it is there, very faint, in the triangular part below the cross on the roof. I'd known a bit about this gentleman before I visited. Born in 1789 and died in 1875 to a prominent family from Haddingtonshire in Scotland. But moving round to the side of the mausoleum, wow, this side panel gave his whole military history. What a find. This is the full inscription of the headstone on the side of the building. There was also a secondary one with details of his son. This one, however, gave me such a lot of information, as well as the battles he'd been in, when he joined the Scots Guards at 16, injuries he suffered in battles, promotions, awards. He was made a Grand Cross of the Bath in 1868. There was also information about his wife and daughters, and even the devoted servant who was buried in the mausoleum with her old boss. On my website, I have a section called Aitchisons of Note, and I have a document with more information about General Sir John Aitchison here. So if anybody's interested, they can go and have a look on there. So back to the Aitchison website and how I use it with gravestones. Well, first of all, before you can add the gravestone to the website, you need to attach your photos on your software. Then on the TNG site, create the cemetery, and there is an option to locate it on a map and pinpoint it, which is what I do. Once you do an update to your site by importing the latest GEDCOM from your software, then the link appears in your media. All you have to do is to connect the original photo to the link, and hey presto, it all appears in TNG. I then create an album for each graveyard where there's a number of photos so that they can all appear together. The Aitchison TNG website gravestone picture shows map then of the graveyard as well as the cemetery photos in this graveyard. The information imported via the GEDCOM shows all the information you have in your software, as well the media items that you have attached. And this is really for those that haven't got a website or already dealt with it or thinking about doing one. this is how it would show. It shows the map that I added for the burial at the top here of the screen, as well as their parents' details that you can see, so you can click through. It shows the children's details. Again, you can click and get to their pages. The feature I love about this as well is it shows a map with all the events of the person you're dealing with identified on the map. Unfortunately, on this scale, the 2 is hidden behind the number 3, but it is there. The first document just below here on the map is a passport application from 1856. Here is Sir John applying for his passport in November 27th, and in fact the entry before it is of his brother Rear Admiral Robert Aitchison. But look at this entry 6 lines below, the passport application of His Royal Highness Prince Albert of the royal family. So lots of interesting things that you can turn up. This is one of my oldest headstones in the project, 1696, from St Mary's in Haddington, of David Aitchison, the spelling without the I after the A Baxter Burgess. Intricate details, and on the reverse side, the skull and crossbones, the symbols of mortality, the egg timer, and a winged soul, which is a symbol of immortality, along with Memento Mori. This one, the following year, in the same graveyard, shows on the reverse some hands as well as a shovel and other implements. Many of the stones in this period, in particularly Scottish graveyards, have carvings on the back, and it's well worth having a look at the back of any headstone when you're visiting a graveyard. Many of the stones, as I say, over that period, and for the next approximately 150 years or so, have tools of the trade of the person on the rear. There are numerous, but some of the most common that I've seen are these I've listed here: the shuttle of a weaver, the square and compass of a mason, 4, which symbolises a merchant. And I won't read all of these out, but these are some of the things that you will see. But we'll have a look at some of the collection, some of the samples from my own collection, which we can have a look at a bit more detail here. So the first one in the top left there, you can see the shuttle. Then you have a deer, which is the symbol for or the head of a deer, which is a gamekeeper. You have a wig maker, you have some baker's tools there, the merchant, the 4, as I say, the 4 corners of the globe, and then you've got a glove and belt maker. So just have a look at this one. This is from a gentleman called Andrew Kippen, who was the Deacon of Glovers, and the Glovers were a very important trade in Perth, and this stone is full of Glover symbols. The stone is in Greyfriars graveyard. The gloves are obviously self-explanatory, but beneath it you have a buckle, and you've got the shears on either side of the stretcher, which was used for shaping the fingers. The strange object above is not a surgical truss, but leather breeches, one of the articles that apprentices had to make to enter the Glover calling. Between the gloves is a bundle of 5 bells, a little bit like sleigh bells, used in Morris dancing. The Glover's dance was an ancient tradition in Perth. The winged soul has a rose of paradise on either side. Paradise was originally Persian for gardened, and Persia was famous for its roses. Beneath is a globe quartered with galleys, a West Coast feature rare in Perth. At the foot of the stone, the skull seems to be wearing spectacles, and we'll see that on a couple of the others, so obviously the same mason. One of several stones of the important merchant gildry, the 4M device is the merchant sign originally used in medieval times to mark bales of merchandise. Also symbolises, as I mentioned before, the 4 corners of the globe. The baker's symbol with the peel or paddle that the bread went into the oven on. The soul has a double layer of feathers on the wings, and the date carved on either side. The shield carries 2 razors, 2 combs, and in the centre a wig stand to which the mason has most quaintly given a profile face. A fair number of the 18th century Scottish stones show the deceased, or even his soul, wearing a wig, but strangely there remain only 2 headstones to barbers of this period. This particular stone is from 1777. From 1788, the glove and napping shears to trim the surface fluff or nap were the usual dyer's emblems, but the press for squeezing the cloth dry and flatten it is unusual. A recess surrounds the winged soul's heads to give it greater depth, and the skull seems to be wearing spectacles, and this is another one from that same mason, so probably the same one who made the stone. A farmer here, we have a plough, We have the Mason symbols, with the most common, the cross, compass, and set square. This stone from the carriers is from 1753 and is arranged conventionally with a winged soul beaming cheerfully at the top. It has the memento mori and the emblems of death at the bottom. Life and work in the centre. We've got the carrier's horse and cart and harness. It's shown with William Peter himself sitting in his driving coat and hat. The horse's tail has been bound to keep it off the axle, and the drapery is probably a classical decorative feature, if not a mort cloth or a horse blanket possibly. The Garden of Eden is a natural choice for a gardener, with a cross spade and rake under the tree of knowledge. On our left is a level, and on the right a cord reel with 3 marker flags underneath. The serpent is coiled around the tree, and Adam and Eve are wearing their fig leaf aprons. The inscription under the winged soul reads, "A principio," from the beginning. This stone is from 1782. This stone from 1747 is dominated by a wonderfully detailed ship. You've got the high forecastle, the jack mast on the bowsprit, and the lateen spleen on the mizzenmast, rather than the later gaff and boom. The saltire flies from the mizzen, with anchor flags on the main and foremast as signs of hope. Above is a monogram framed, but a serpent with its tail in its mouth, a rare emblem of eternity. Beneath is a shield with compass and anchor, borne by 2 sailors wearing short breeches, short jackets, and stout shoes. The one on the right seems to be smoking a pipe. At the bottom is the scroll Soli Deo Gloria, Gloria to God only. The posters are decorated with upward flaming torches, which represent eternal life, the resurrection, and downward doused torches, death. On the shoulders of the stone are mourning putti. Adam and Eve depicted here from a stone in Medvin with the tree of everlasting life. There's lots more going on this stone as well. We have another figure at the top of the stone and a hammer at the bottom. A circle encloses compass, a sun, moon, and stars. Really interesting stone. This one from Tibbermore Church shows a farmer who had lots of different interests. So let's take a closer look. We have the sheaf of corn on the top of the curling stone. It used to curl in the winter months. The bull, he used to breed prize cattle, we've discovered. So his life here is depicted on the stone. So after my little digression to look at a few headstones, I just love finding some of the old stones with these designs on them. Another great way of gaining more information is searching through newspapers after you get the date of death from the headstone and finding an obituary. They are so useful putting family information together because the obituaries give you the name of the spouse, brothers, sisters, children, possibly their spouses' names, grandchildren, what their occupation was, and many other tidbits of information that help you build up the picture and build up the families. This obituary from 1924 was from my great-grandfather. A veteran shepherd's death, which was reported. Mr. George Aitchison, shepherd, who was well known and highly respected in East Lothian, died on Monday at Berryhill Foot, Perthshire, in his 63rd year. When Mr. Middlemass, East Linton, took the grazing farm of Berryhill in 1913, he engaged Mr. Aitchison to supervise it. Here we found out when the family moved from East Lothian to Perthshire. He was an expert with sheep and proved an excellent manager. His health began to fail about 12 months ago, and he recently was induced to take matters more quietly, having the assistance of his son George, my grandfather. A fine type of man, trustworthy and faithful, Mr. Aitchison earned the esteem of all with whom he came in contact. He lost 2 fine boys, Peter and James, in the war and felt the blow severely. The deepest sympathies extended to Mrs. Aitchison and the members of his family. The picture on the homepage of my website is of George and his family, including the sons Peter and James that are mentioned here. So again, it gives us some clues to go and look for war records for the 2 boys, Peter and James. This lady probably needs no introduction, Dame June Whitfield, but what you probably didn't know is that her married name was Mrs. Tim Aitchison. This picture is just after she received her damehood. She starred in many films. She appeared in 4 of the Carry On films, Carry On Nurse, back in 1959, Carry On Abroad, Carry On Girls, Carry On Columbus, 1992, and she also appeared on Terry and June, 1979 to 1987, a sitcom, as well as many others. So I'm just picking up a few of the Aitchison highlights, and jumping now to Lahore in Pakistan, we find Aitchison College, which was founded in 1886. When Aitchison was founded, its emphasis was on educating the princely elites. Since independence, this has given way to an egalitarian mix of pupils drawn from all parts of the country. Cambridge curriculum is taught in junior and prep schools, with the additional option of Aga Khan Matric and FSC in senior. Aitchison College offers a broad and challenging educational programme for boarding and day students, based on the added benefits of engagement in sports, clubs and societies. It was this man, Charles Umferston Aitchison, who founded the college. He was born in 1832 and died in 1896. He was the first focus in my stories behind the stones of Aitchison, and you'll find this on Aitchisons of Note on the website. He joined the Indian Civil Service, and after spending a year in England in the study of law and Oriental languages, he landed at Kolkata in 1856. He was appointed as assistant in Hisar, and obviously, I can go into a whole lot of detail about Charles, which I won't necessarily on this call or this meeting tonight. But if anybody would like to have more information about him, it's on the Aitchison of Note section, and it is a really interesting career. He went to British Burma. He was a nominated Knight Commander of the Order of the Star of India, KCSI, became Sir Charles. He was in the Punjab, and he eventually retired and left India in 1888. And early in the following year, he settled in London. And he has actually two gravestones, one in Oxford and one up in Laswade in Midlothian, just outside Edinburgh, which is where the family came from. So he was quite a religious man. And as I say, that's probably why he ended up with the two headstones there, where he was based, and then one back with the family. Jean Aitchison is supposedly a descendant of Sir Charles, but as yet I've still to prove the link. I haven't spent a lot of time on that particular link, but I do need to look into that one a bit more. She was born in 1938. She's a linguist and professor and language and communication, University of Oxford. Craigie Mason Aitchison, Lord Aitchison, as he was born in 1882. He died in 1941. He was a Scottish politician and a famous judge. He became an advocate in 1907, and he was particularly effective as a defence counsel in criminal cases, and was regarded as the best advocate before a jury since Sheriff Comrie Thompson, and was noted for the Bickerstaff and John Donald Merrick cases. He was made a King's Counsel in 1923, and he worked with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and others to secure the release of Oscar Slater, the victim, one of the most notorious miscarriages of justice in the early 20th century. Aitchison, who was leading counsel at the appeal in 1929, gave a 14-hour speech. His son, Craigie Aitchison, or John Ronald Craigie Aitchison to give him his full name, was a Scottish painter, 1926 to 2009. His dog Sunday, a Bedlington Terrier, featuring in many of the paintings, including one of the more famous ones called Dog in Red, which is the one sat behind him here. A selection of some of his paintings. Crucifixion was also a common theme in his paintings, and Brian Sewell, a London Evening Standard art critic, panned his work, describing Aitchison as a painter of too considered trifles. Less rarefied critics tended to dismiss his work as the sort of thing a 10-year-old might do. I must admit, I probably would agree with that. His style remained more or less unchanged for 50 years. In 1955, Craigie was awarded a British Council scholarship to study in Italy. He travelled there with Miles Murphy in an ancient London taxi, which had no reverse and had to be driven through the Alps in first gear. The vehicle finally expired outside Rome Central Station, and the two students were helped by a Vatican clerk who put them up in the palace and eventually stored the taxi in the Vatican basement, or so the story goes. George Aitchison, 1792 to 1861, and his son George, again we have the names following, 1825 to 1910, were both famous architects. One of the most famous works was that of Leighton House in Kensington, the Arab Hall, which was designed in 1880. James Edward Tierney Aitchison was a Scottish surgeon and botanist. He entered the Honourable East India Company in 1858, the Bengal Medical Service, as an assistant surgeon. Again, having picked up an obituary, we learn he was very lively disposition, fond of all sorts of games, including quoits, cricket and tennis. He was an abstainer and a non-smoker, and was very fond of reading history and travels. Both his parents were said to have a great love of flowers, and his mother, Mary Turner, the sister of John William Turner, professor of surgery in Edinburgh, had some knowledge in botany. In his student days, he was an enthusiastic field botanist and gained a first-class certificate in the botany class herbarium competition in 1854 for a collection of 530 plants gathered, pressed, mounted and arranged in the comparatively short period of 4 months. He harvested plants in India from 1861 to 1872 and has written, there are books that he has written, the Catalogue of the Plants of the Punjab. And again, I'm just going to skip through this one because I'm conscious of time. He was awarded the honour of CIE, was Surgeon Major in the Bengal Army, and some of the works, he also collected plants when they came back. He worked with the Linnean Society. And just to give you an idea of the scale of his collecting, he reported that during his Afghan delimitation, he brought around 800 species, comprising about 10,000 specimens, back to England. And amongst them, there are three that were given the Aitchison name, Prunus aitchisoni, and they are still based down, or they have a sample down in the Kew Herbarium. Again, more information about him on the Aitchisons of Note section on the website. This is a James Aitchison. He emigrated to the USA in about 1876, set up a grocery business in Iowa, and his son William followed him in the business. But meanwhile, back in Scotland, his other son, Robert Swan Aitchison, who was a qualified physician, he'd been a medical student in the 1881 census in Edinburgh, moved down to Crawley, and eventually he died there of pneumonia. He's buried in a church in Sussex. That church has stained glass windows depicting Jesus, Sir Galahad and St. Stephen, and it's erected in memory of the parent. You can see, just, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, on the bottom there is the inscription for their details. John Aitchison was a prominent merchant in Glasgow. He designed a patent machine for sugar refining, and he appears in the Sugar Refiners and Sugar Bakers database, an interesting database that is always worth checking if you're doing a one-name study. You never know who you might find there. But information was collected from the Post Office directories, Slater's directory, and the Glasgow Sheriff Court inventories. But it all goes to part of a one-name study. And I noticed some butchers in there, Julie and Stephen. I noticed one Dalgleish when I was flicking through there. More recent famous person, John Aitchison, the wildlife filmmaker. John has done the Planet Earth 2 series and Frozen Earth. I have a link here which shows him collecting his award, which we can come back and have a look at. And we have Peter Aitchison, who raced in the 1937 British team, World Ski Championship as it's known now, and the Gold K. He goes climbing in the summer with his father, Mr. Irvin Aitchison. Beatrice Aitchison, mathematician, had to pick a couple of women on here as well, and I have a video link on here which shows an interview of her just a couple of years before she died. I'm not sure if that will. Okay, it's going to pick up adverts, so we won't do that just now. John Aitchison Co, Edinburgh, beer company founded in 1828. It lasted until 1895. The company won silver medals for its beers at the Paris 1867, and you can see that on the labels on here, Amsterdam 1869 and the London 1873 exhibitions. And amongst the beers it produced are strong Edinburgh ale, pale Edinburgh ale, superior ale, table ale, etc. John Aitchison had been involved with his father William's business from about 1820, when the company's brewing operations were moved from Carefield in Peebles to the Canongate Brewery up in Edinburgh, and he became a partner. After he died, after William died, control passed to John and the second son, William Kerr Aitchison, and they were part of the founding members of the Edinburgh Brewers Association, which became the Brewers Association of Scotland. And under John's direction, the company expanded into markets outside Scotland, including Newcastle, Sunderland, etc. And when he died, obviously it was passed on to his sons, William, again a William, and Thomas Stoddart Aitchison, who succeeded in the business. Dolan and Aitchison, probably everybody is aware of, most recognisable to British people, which was integrated into Boots Optician in 2009. The history is James Aitchison, about 1860 to 1911 when he died. The firm was founded in 1889 in 47 Fleet Street. It was merged in 1927 to form Dolan and Aitchison, and he undertook his apprenticeship with an optician's firm in High Holborn before setting up the business. He's said to have been uncomfortable with the very basic methods that his previous employers used to examine and test patients' eyes, and in a time where glasses were becoming commonplace across all classes, he quickly carved himself a niche for supplying very good high-quality lenses at reasonable rates, which appealed to the varying pocket sizes, providing the public with gold, silver and steel frames for spectacles, monocles, pince-nez, etc. And given his reason for leaving the previous employment, the subject of standards within the industry continued to be an issue close to Aitchison's heart. The worshipful company of spectacle makers was by then purely a means of apprenticeship and for gaining practical skills in manufacture rather than for gaining an understanding of the science of optics. The British Optical Association Aitchison was an enthusiastic founder member and supporter, and he'd been central to both the reformation of the optical industry's educational programs and also to the popularising and naturalising of spectacle wearing across Britain. So someone, I think, very important in that thing. And I think Julie probably has a couple of things she might want to mention on there later as well. He registered many patents, in fact. So again, there's a website which is interesting if you're doing a one-name study. And you can look for one-namers for anyone who has registered a patent, and that gives you all sorts of interesting information. Burt Reynolds did an advert for them. So quickly moving on now, almost finished. Oops. Murder, mystery and intrigue. The Scottish Indexes have fantastic site, especially if you want to research criminal ancestor. their Scottish criminal database throws up all sorts of interesting information. And when I looked into this particular story of George Aitchison from Eyemouth in Berwickshire, it really hit me and left me thinking of the poor wife left behind with small children. What happened? What went wrong? Some of the newspaper accounts of the event, George was found lying covered in straw. What had probably started out as a bit of nonsense or maybe bullying, where George's cap was flung up onto a barrel. He tried to climb up and the barrel was moved or was pushed, causing him to fall and bang his head. Frightened, the two boys carried him off and stuck him in a shed and covered him up. Too late for help. The next day, he unfortunately passed away. Now, I have to say, Emma Maxwell from the Scottish Indexes has very kindly forwarded me the precognition and trial papers from the case, which make extremely interesting reading. Scottish Indexes also do regular online conferences, and the next one they've got is on the 15th of April, and that's really worth a look. There's often interesting speakers speaking on there, so definitely have a look at that one. The Eyemouth disaster of the 14th of October 1881, disaster struck the fishing community of Eyemouth, and when you go around the gravestones or graveyards of Ayton and Eyemouth, there's quite a number make reference to this disaster. Peter Aitchison has written a book about this called Black Friday. 189 men drowned in one afternoon. It's Scotland's worst fishing disaster, and many Aitchisons lost their life that terrible day. So that's the name of the book, a copy of the book there. James Aitchison, Jamie the Bee, he had 65 convictions, and again we go back to the Scottish Indexes, the prison register database. He was a mimic, a ventriloquist. He got his name for impersonating the bee, but one person there responsible for 65 different entries. So thank you for sticking with me. I'm sorry, a couple of little technical things there with my videos. I hope you found it interesting, from my methodology to different record sets, information that can maybe help you with your own study. And remember, if you are thinking about setting up your own website, don't dally, just get on and do it. Many of my contacts have happened because the website is out there. How would I describe my study? Never enough time to get all these stories and uncover the lives of the Aitchison in past times. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Diana, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I'm exhausted just listening to you. That was amazing. Just coming quickly back to Dollars and Aitchinson, there is actually a number of stuff online. There's actually a book called Eyes Right. It's on Internet Archive. And in terms of following up material, you may well find that there's material on the Wellcome library. There's some material there. It's had a grant to digitize a whole load of stuff from there, so anything that's been merged from one business to another that's ended up within Boots is all within their archive and is available. There's also the other option is you may well find there's some things on the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. They have an archive. It's quite limited in what's the materials online, and they kind of charge an arm and a leg to do some research, but I might be able to assist in that regard, and I don't charge an arm and a leg. The other option is you may well find that there is some other material within the libraries of universities where they're doing ophthalmics as part of degree courses. Very often you'll find that there are things that have just been randomly put somewhere because somebody who didn't know there was an archive thought, well, this is really good, but we can't get rid of it. Let's stick it here. So that was my only comment with regards to Dolan and Aitchinson. There has just been, I think, one question. Paul House says, fascinating, thank you. I don't know about, I'm absolutely exhausted just listening to you, but I still wrote 2 pages of notes, even though you were racing through. But I will say, as someone who does quite a lot of talks, I never do a live test to YouTube. I'm impressed that you did, and maybe I should try and do it because you just went for it. I could hear in my head the echoing of my voice saying to you, just do it. just do your studies. Yeah, just do it. And I think that's really good.
I think because you wait and wait and you wait for the time when you think it's right, when you've finished, when you've done a bit more, but there's just always so much more to do. There's never a right time. So just get out there and do it. Anybody who's sitting on the fence thinking about it, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul's just asked a question around how do you get around the cost using Scotland's people? Because obviously the cost is, I guess,
Obviously, yeah, Scotland's people because you're using credits.
yeah,
A lot of the information, having picked up from headstones, obviously there can be mistakes on there, and I have found, particularly at the beginning of a year, someone has put the wrong year on a headstone. Using a lot of transcriptions, first of all, from Find My Past, from the different websites. Find My Past has been, I say, you could use Ancestry as well. I've focused first on Find My Past and working through all the record sets for there. Having put my study out there, to be fair, a lot of people have given me documents that they have, which has helped to keep the cost down because they've then provided documents from their branches of the family. So again, another reason for putting your study out there, you will get help from others and they will provide you with documents. If you give them or share information that you have and do a little bit of work on their branch, they're more than willing to pass on and give you information as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I was only on Scotland's people earlier today, actually, and very quickly spent quite a lot of money on chasing down something that was completely wrong because I couldn't read my own writing. So there are some, there is always going to be a negative to using a site like Scotland's people. That said, it is a really great resource.
And you can narrow things down. You can, if you're looking for something specific, you can narrow, and by doing the one name study, it also helps you because you narrow down, and if you keep track of the reference number for each one, you can actually work out which one it is fairly easily before you order the wrong document.
Yeah, I wish I'd remembered that and not been quite so happy to click just that word, just do it. Doesn't always work, of course, if you do that. But I will say, if you've got a name that is registered, in the case of, obviously, for Paul, if there are, you can search and look through their marriages. If you don't want, you can get so much before you even click that you're going to spend out credits. But if the other name is registered, or perhaps somebody that you know might be going to Edinburgh, that might be something to kind of trade off material to see if other people, to see if other people can tap
The
into
other
that.
half of the marriage, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the 1881 census you don't have to pay for. You can go onto the LDS option and you don't have to pay for that one. So that gives you a great start on the Scottish people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, we still have, I think, the marriages. What was originally the Scottish transcriptions, I think, have all gone into marriages, and they have just our one marriage file. So it's always worth looking to see what else is available, either on the Guild website or to see what in whatever place. I've just done a set of work on Sussex for my butcher study. Mainly I had quite a lot of stuff already, but I wanted to kind of do a deep dive, and I wanted to see what I could do without using Ancestry and Find My Past. I've managed to do quite a lot, mainly by using Sussex Record Society Library. They had access to, they've made available lots of their material. So I'm in the process of doing something around doing a one name study on the cheap, which doesn't have a very clicky title to it. But I think there's quite a lot out there. I think we just get into the I think we find it really easy just to go to Ancestry or Find My Past or whatever you've got a subscription. And sometimes you almost want to say, no, I can't use those. I'm going to impose a ban and just use what else and see what else is out there. just seen a question from Teresa, who says a lot of copyright documents on the website from the National Archives. Have you paid the charge for all of these and got permission from the IMDb for the June Whitfield ones, or just hoping you don't get caught?
For the June Whitfield, obviously I've just put them on for this presentation. No, I haven't. That's obviously something I've fallen foul of there.
Certainly with things that have come from the National Archive, if you are able to use material from the National Archives as long as it's for private research. Now you could say, well, a website's not private research. The National Archives view that if you don't charge for access, it's publicly available, therefore you're allowed to use it. So would a copyright lawyer have an objection to it? Well, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but I would say as long as you can prove that actually your intention was to educate people, as opposed to tapping someone up £10 to look at your website, which clearly you're not doing, I think you're probably okay. In terms of this recording, once it's been available for a while, it will go behind the paywall, and so there won't be any public access to it for a long period of time. We've agreed so that would be around 2 weeks for the Janet Few presentation, which was earlier. I want to say earlier this month, but actually it must have been last month. So there is precedent's been set by us that we will have it available to the public as part of our education remit, but also it enables people to be able to see the website and to explore your study. And I think if you're not tapping people up for the money, I think there is a legal entity and there is an ethically correct process. But as far as the National Archives are concerned, their view is that you don't need to. And in fact, there wasn't actually, I think, very much Scottish material on there. So I think you're probably okay.
Okay.
But if you're not, I'll happily have a whip round for you, Diana, so you'll be all right.
Thank you.
So Marion says, I was impressed with the graveyard information that you're able to use to locate places on OS maps. Does anyone know of a similar site for English burials? I don't personally know of one, but Marion was impressed with Diana's organisation skills in terms of the planning that goes into, and I guess that's because you live so far away that you are.
Yeah, you have to take the most, or get the most out of your time, because you can't just pop back next weekend because you forgot something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is maybe something we could perhaps look to, and maybe you'll come back next year and give us a bit more of a in-depth detail in terms of your graveyard project, because I think it sounds really, really fun. And of course, there are sites like Billion Graves and Find a Grave, but those tend to be more towards the US, but there are others on there. There's also another grave site that I can't think of for the moment, but I will see if I can find it, and if I can, I will drop you a note, Marion, and I'll make a note of it when I put up the recording. Another Paul says, how do you file and name your images?
The actual photos, that's always a challenge. It's knowing how to do it, but I generally would have the main person, their name first, and if I have 5 or 6 pictures of the same person, I would then do 1, 2, 3, 4 after the name. Or use their date. So George Aitchison, his date of birth, and then if I have 5 pictures of the same person, George Aitchison with the date of birth, and then 1, George Aitchison date of birth, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that you know which George Aitchison the picture is off. Does that make sense? And if it's a wedding picture, then I would always have, I think, is it WED wedding, a wedding photo, so that all my wedding pictures come up together. So it's using the same sort of logic of the 3 letters for a country. So WED for a wedding, for example, would give me all my wedding pictures together. Then the year. So I would always use a year in the picture if I could.
Okay, and that makes sense. I have truly shocking filing, and I have duplicates, renaming, and I'm trying to find a structure that links me into, so that my individuals within my database, and I use that number. So my mum, for example, is number 4. So everything that is a picture of my mum where she's in the picture is, and the same for documents, not just pictures, has the number 4 linked into it. But it's like anything, isn't it? You have to kind of try a few to see whether what you decide to do is actually going to work. So you
Yeah,
kind
it's
of need
trial and error. Different people's brains work in different ways, so different logics would see things differently. You know, the description of trying to put families within families, I just found just didn't work for me. I couldn't find someone, and I would end up with the same name for a document unintentionally, and then when you put it into your software program, it links to the wrong one, and then you just get in a complete mess. So it was trial and error, working out what worked for me, and this system certainly works for me. So I've got almost 40,000 individuals with over 8,000 media items, and I can find anything really quickly.
Yeah. There's been another comment from Teresa, which I'm not going to read out, but Teresa, I will email you this evening. Paul Howe says, find a grave can be useful, as can a site called A Church Near You, both of which have longitude and latitude. Okay. That's not the site I was thinking of. There's another site that has pictures of headstones. I can't remember who it's. There's quite a
Not
few.
Billion Graves? You
No.
mentioned that one.
Yeah, no, not Billion
Deceased
Graves.
Online? Deceased Online?
No, it's not that one either. It's run by somebody. You have to email them and ask for and they'll send you a good image of whatever it is that you're looking at. I can't remember. I know that I've emailed the person several times, and the reason that they've gone with that approach is because some people don't say thank you. You know, unfortunately, you can't control what other people do, but I think it's if I find the site, I will share the link. Paul says, this is a different Paul, so this is the Paul that asked the thing about the images. Says, I tend to use both the birth and death years, which I have yet to find 2 the same. If I use the birth, it wouldn't work. I guess it depends how big your study is. And it probably, and I guess you're always going to find that you'll get a glut of people that are with the same name, and maybe names go in peaks and troughs, don't they? So, you know, when I was born, there were lots of people called Julie. Now it's not, you don't find people have that given name quite as much. So maybe you'll find that the use of given names goes round in cycles. As I think I may have shared, certainly I think in the last webinar, my great nephew has the name of Trip with 2 P's. I'm pretty sure that was not used in a previous period of time, but I stand to be corrected if someone wants to look at Find My Past or FreeBMD and see if anyone's got the name of Trip. The other Paul now said as try ANO, so basically country, I suppose it says, then year, month, date would also keep things in order. although it doesn't sort by country as Diana's method does. Oh, apparently I've got that wrong. AN other. Oh, okay, I'm with you now, Paul. Yeah, that would make sense. AN other. Okay, so AN other, and then year, month, date. I'll probably not explain that. I think it probably sounds better when you say it, Paul, to be honest. Either that or write me a paragraph that I'll read out, or unmute yourself and come through. And if you want to unmute yourself, it's that little, it's the second one down, I think, on the little circle on the left hand side. So Paul Featherstone now says, I can have 2 John's birth per quarter, which is why I find the birth dates are used. Oh, I have to unmute you, Paul. Okay, let me unmute you. Do I have to unmute you? Are you sure? I've muted myself now. Let me have a quick look, Paul. I'm sure you can unmute yourself. I'm sure people have unmuted themselves before. Let me see if I can work it out. God, you'd never think I do these every month, would you? Absolutely dismal. I don't know that I can. That's really odd. I should be able to unmute you, even if you can't. Dan, you've got the controls. Are you able to see if you can unmute Paul House?
Let me have a look.
Given that I turn up every month and do these and still make a mess of it.
I can only see you and me on the list for 10. I can't see the other attendees.
Oh, you can't see the other attendees. Oh, hold on a minute.
No.
I forgot to look there. Hold on, that makes complete sense.
If you go to attendees, I can just see, and you've got a little mute button, I think, possibly on there.
Yeah, I think it's more a case of definitely operator error. Paul,
hey, hello, Julie.
Oh, God.
Hi, Diana. Thank you very much. Now, my point was simply that if you use AN other, let's say in your database, it might be GL Aitchison, and then you put YYYY for the year, and then MM for the month, and then DD for the day as your file name. Everything will be kept in neat order. So you'll always be able to find somebody. It's very, very unlikely that 2 people with the same initials will have been born or died or married on the same day. That's all I was trying to say.
And you said it so much better than I did.
Thank you, Julie.
Are there any more questions before we finish off for today? No, it would appear not. Diana, thank you so much. This has been a really enjoyable webinar. I've really enjoyed listening to you talk about how you organize yourself and how you just went for it in terms of getting your website up, and how you just stay so completely focused and just drill down into what works for you for your study. I think that is really, really interesting. And I think everyone who's done one of these spotlight on their study, it's really good, because everyone does everything in such a different way, and everyone has a different spin to their study, and just by, I guess, what appeals to us individually. And I think it's so it's been really, really great, and I've really enjoyed listening to it. Diana, thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you everyone. I'm going to wrap up for today. As I said, next month we have Chris Patton, the Mount Stuart murders in 1866, Scotland's oldest official cold case. There's a book actually written by Chris. It was fascinating. I recommend it. And no, I was not paid to say that. And then there is Connecting with American Cousins in Completing a One-Name Study with Denise Allen in June, so about 3 weeks later. And then there is one again up in July and August and so forth. I can't remember what comes after. I can't remember what is the webinar for July. But if you want to know what the webinar is, you either go to the website and have a quick look, or you come back next month when Chris moves off the list and something else goes at the very bottom. So thank you very much for joining us for tonight, and this recording will be up at some point over the next few days. And thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.